Well, I'd like to welcome you all to Resource Roundtable. My name is Cindy Brooks. I'm the Executive Director of EDC Team Jefferson. Resource Roundtable is an ongoing offering on the third Thursday of every month where we invite one or more guests to introduce themselves and their services. The Roundtable provides a place where our community can come together and learn more about resources available to them, how to start a business, how to grow a business, or how to plan to sell a business. It's a safe place to ask questions and to share information in the spirit of mutual support. We seek to build over time a network that can seamlessly provide services addressing a range of business questions from startup to succession, ensuring that we have a healthy and resilient, diverse and engaged small business community serving the people of Jefferson County. So just a little bit about etiquette. Please mute yourself if you're not speaking. And what else? Put your questions in the chat and we'll call on you, or I'll read them out loud if we get a ton of them at once. Please be respectful. We all likely represent a number of different perspectives, and we're all here to listen and learn and share. It's okay to disagree with one another as long as we're respectful about that. And I don't really have any announcements this month, but I'd like to introduce you to our special guest today, Micah Jonet. And tell me if I'm pronouncing your last name wrong, Micah.
It's Jonet.
Jonet.
Looks French, but it's not.
Okay. Michael Jonet from the Center for Inclusive Entrepreneurship, who will address the topic of how to prepare for upcoming grants. Micah is going to help us understand how to get ready, how to apply, and how to position ourselves and our businesses to take advantage of opportunities likely to come. The Center for Inclusive Entrepreneurship provides training, one-on-one advising, and other support to help with the first steps of building a business, from idea generation to being solidly established and ready to grow. CIE prioritizes people with limited resources from marginalized communities and believes anyone can be an entrepreneur. CIE's North Peninsula team serves people in Kalaloch and Jefferson counties, and all services are free to all participants. So with that, Micah, I'll give you the floor. Thank you for being here.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you for having me. So I'll talk a bit about grants. They vary quite a bit, and they're all complicated in their own way. So it is just sort of a high level view. I'll start us off here. Can everybody see my screen all right? Perfect. All right. So I'll just sort of break them out and talk about the four main groups of grants that you're really going to see. There are federal grants. There's a lot of USDA grants, which can help quite a bit out here. I believe every part of Jefferson and Kalaloch County counts as rural in the eyes of the USDA. SBA grants, those were a lot of the pandemic relief money came through the SBA. And though those federal grant programs are often pretty cumbersome, it's the federal government. They see every document that you ever make, and they want to double check it when you're applying for their grants. A next big chunk that we'll see out here is state grants. Working Washington 5 should be coming up. It's going to be a state grant. They haven't exactly focused it yet, but it has always, in the past, it's been all pandemic relief, focused on slightly different industries that seem to have been impacted most. The state will also has ongoing grants that target specific industries or things that the Commerce Department is really trying to encourage. First that came off my head is that there are export grants available. If you want to start exporting your product, you can talk with the state about it and sort of give your exporting plan. And there's grants for up to $5,000 just to sort of get you started in it. Underneath the state level, there are local grants as well. Team Jefferson just did the ARPA grant, which was a local over there. During the beginning of especially at the beginning of the pandemic, a lot of cities were doing rent or utility grants to help keep small businesses afloat. And then the fourth big category are going to be all the private grants. Corporations and nonprofits will both do grants. The corporate grants are often competitive, and they are typically only going to pick one or two winners. Some of them are nationwide. The nationwide ones are hard to win. You're throwing your name in with a hat with 20,000 other people, and only one name can get picked. The smaller regional companies will sometimes focus just upon the region. Kitsap Bank, I believe it was, used to do the Edge competition, which was a grant program just for Western Washington. Those are going to be an easier lift than the ones where you're competing against everybody across the nation. The other big section of the private grants are nonprofits. Sometimes it'll be economic development groups. Other times it'll be really mission focused. There will be grants that find any if there's any specific subsection of the population that has nonprofits caring for them, often there will be grants specifically for that group. Veterans grants by veterans organizations, and they'll get really granular too. Sometimes you'll get an organization that's doing a grant for Asian American women in technology. And those are, if you fall within the group, it's worth going for, just because it's separating out so many potential applicants that you're a bigger fish in a smaller pond. They all ask for different things, but I'll kind of go over the main things that people will run into while they're applying for those grants. The biggest one is just sort of a lack of, since they don't know you, the people who are reviewing the grants don't know you. They need to have a third party kind of prove that you're a business, prove that you are who you say you are. Not having a business license, even if you do the work for 10 years, if you haven't told the state that you're a business, most funders aren't going to believe you. And a big part of it too, is a lot of grant money is tied to businesses having followed all the rules. Having your L&I be current, not having any late taxes paid. Cindy, you just ran that ARPA grant. What would seem to be the biggest issue that came up in that?
I think a lot of small businesses, they were a little mystified about how to put together a financial statement, like a profit and loss, if they hadn't done that before, the newer businesses in particular.
Mm-hmm.
And trying to figure out what part of their back taxes. We asked for a few years back, like a Schedule C if you're an LLC. So, pulling that and providing it, uploading documents was difficult. Kathy, do you have some more to add? Because you worked more closely with the small businesses that were applying.
There we go. A lot of people, not a lot, a few people thought it was okay just to submit some random piece of paperwork when we were asking for specific things like 2020 taxes. People would write in paragraphs about how great their business was, and it's like, and then the follow-up that we had to do took so much time. So when people are asking for a certain item, it's good to provide it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's a really good point, because EDC Team Jefferson is great, and they will do the follow-up if you send something to them that's wrong. A lot of places won't. A lot of places will send you a letter and just be like, sorry, not accepted, or will act like you would never even apply if you don't have every single box checked that they're really looking for. And that really kind of leads into the second issue that people run into too, is grants will get announced on Monday and they'll close next Friday. A lot of grants have such a quick turnaround that if you don't already have all of those formal business documents ready or able to be pulled, you can easily run out of time before just gathering everything, working with the state to get whatever, any wrong addresses on your documents fixed before the grant window or by the grant window's closing date. And that leads even further into the third one, is with how quickly the grants open and close, you need to be on them quick. You need to know about them day 1, day 2, because if you find out about them 5 days into a 7-day period, if you don't have everything sitting in a folder ready to go right away, you're going to start running into some problems. And that's why we're here. It's a lot of work to keep track of what's going on, and it's too much work for any one person to do. So with that, rely on the economic development groups here on the peninsula. There's a lot of us. We're all spending too much time parsing through words and finding the lists of what we need. Does anybody have any questions about what we talked about here? Perfect. Yeah, so just sort of to prepare for the grants, you don't want to ever react for them. You want to have stuff ready to go as soon as they announced. Keeping your financials and bookkeeping up to date is super important, especially during the pandemic. So many grants ask for your current financials, how you were doing in the day. And if you've got to put together the past 3 months, that's going to be hard to do in the amount of time they give you. Alongside that, all of your past financials, your old tax returns, everything like that, it's really a good idea to keep that all together. You don't want to have to dig through the one folder on your computer to find the tax return from 2019, dig somewhere else to find 2020. If you can start compiling all of the business documents, everything that proves you are who you are, proves the money that you've made money, that you've sold product. If you can get all of that into one place, then when you are looking through the requirements for that grant, you know exactly where to go to pull that information for you. The second topic is really only applies to some of the grants out there, especially grants that are more project focused. Agriculture will have hundreds of those grants. The USDA will come out with a whole list of things that they're trying to fund, and nonprofits, the Tilt Alliance is an example of it. They'll come out and they're like, we've got this money and we want to spend it this way. How would you give us your proposals? I worked with a client who was able to get an entire fence paid for their pasture because they had already done the costing. They'd figured out how much it was going to cost for them to put it up. And the Tilt Alliance put out a grant or a call for submissions, and they could prove that they were a business. And they're like, I need this many posts at this much, this many feet of wire at this cost, and it'll cost me this much to install it. And they were able to write that out, send it in, and they received the grant. Third is knowing who you can make a network of people who help you with it. No matter how prepared you are, you'll see a grant open up, the grant will come up, and they'll ask for something you've never heard of. They'll ask for your Schedule 1120S or they'll give you a whole list of documents that they want you to pull if they relate to your business. And as an accountant, I don't even know what all those documents are. But me, Cindy, all of us here know where to look to find that information, or have colleagues in different organizations that have helped somebody do a similar grant. If it's a really industry specific grant as well, talk to other people in your industry who have received that grant. If you're trying to export, find somebody who's exported, see what kind of documents they had to provide for the state, talk to them about what issues they ran into as they were going through it. The more prepared you are going in, the better of a chance you've got. And a lot of grants don't let you change anything once you put it in. You got to submit everything, and it's got to be perfect, because they're not going to talk to you until they tell you yes or no. Yeah, and we can just a lot of what I've been talking about has been related to financials. So we can spend quite a bit of time here talking about sort of best practices with bookkeeping and record keeping and all of that. And I'll really just say one thing. The best bookkeeping and record keeping system you could make is one that you'll do consistently. If it's just a spreadsheet that you put something in every Friday at 2 p.m., that's perfect. You've got all of your information. You know that no matter what, your information's up to date as of last Friday. I've got a client who hates bookkeeping, doesn't want to do it at all. Used to just have a shoebox full of receipts that they take to an accountant at the end of the year. But they love Starbucks. So their new bookkeeping system is every Friday, they'll only buy themselves a Starbucks on Friday when they're sitting down to do their bookkeeping, because it keeps them on task and it's a nice little reward. Since they've started doing that, they've been able to see what months seem to make them the most money, what months they're losing money and they need to start doing sales. Having that data down it takes a little bit of time, and sometimes it's a little frustrating and confusing when you face a new issue, but having that down makes so many other things so much easier. And when a grant application does come up, you don't have to spend your time racking your brain, digging through receipts, pulling your bank statement, your credit cards, your checkbooks, all of that. You get to spend your time thinking about what you would use that money for, and what you have to, and double checking the work that you're putting into that application. Does anybody have you've used a lot of financial terminology already in this presentation. So I just want to open up the floor to anybody who has questions, either vocabulary questions or just how to implement some of the things in your business that'll help you with any grants coming up.
Well, Micah, while we're waiting for people to formulate questions, I'm wondering, for those of us, I'm speaking about myself too, as you know, years ago when I was a young entrepreneur, it was sort of a money in and out of my wallet accounting system. If you haven't really done your bookkeeping before, what would be the best place to start? And what's the advantage beyond this grant application to having these books these current? How does that help your business thinking?
Yeah. So the best way to start is to just start. The worst thing you can do in bookkeeping is expect yourself to remember something. The best way to start is to just, if it's a notebook that you buy for $2 at Walmart and you're writing down everything you buy as you're starting your business, perfect. That's a bookkeeping system. You're keeping it in a book. As long as you're taking it out of your head and getting it down, you're taking the right steps. And the real benefit of it is our brains do not handle numbers very well. Even if you're good at math, if you got a brain for math, our brains psychologically just do not understand numbers. You ask a kid if they want 2/3 of something or a quarter, they'll say a quarter because it's bigger. Our brain, we barely outgrow that as we get older. Having something that you can look at and compare numbers to other numbers is always going to make it easier, especially as those numbers get more and more complicated. If you're just going out and mowing somebody's yard and getting $20, it's easy. You got $20, you spent an hour of your time. If you're baking a cake, it's a whole lot harder. You've sold a cake, but how much flour was in it? How much electricity did you pay for making that cake? Yeah, Cindy, I feel like there was a third part of your question that I did not address.
Well, I'm just, I think there's a progression to learning how to be grant ready, especially with the accounting end of things. So I'm wondering about the progression from small entrepreneurs to, when we start to grow, when would that stage be where we could lean into QuickBooks or some other accounting platform? And how would that help us manage our business differently and be grant ready?
Yeah. The real difference between the real tipping point in your financial journey in a business is when you go from keeping track of everything you've spent to looking forward. And that's the beautiful thing about accounting and bookkeeping, is that you start to notice patterns that you never would have noticed without writing it down. You'll start to see that your electricity spikes like mad in January. You'll start to see that, oh, your sales double. No matter how bad your April is, May is always twice as good. And that it takes a while to get there. Some businesses never get there. Some businesses, it's just tracking what was spent, seeing what was made, and that's important. That's what you need to file your taxes. But being able to look forward and see what you'd be able to do with the money you're expecting to make will put you in a position where, while you're filling out your grant application, you can say with certainty that, oh, if I had an extra $20,000, I could do this, and this, and grow into this direct. I could double the amount of cakes I bake, and I've already got the buyers lined up. I just need this amount of money. We'll do this, and then it will make me more in the future. And it'll help you predict costs. It's hard to do. We're always caught unaware. Even if you go to a big company and talk to their finance department, they're wrong. If they're projecting what's going to happen this year, they're always wrong. Nobody's ever going to be right. But being able to take a guess and to be close gives you a lot more certainty as you're going forward with the grant application. And more importantly, it helps you direct what you want to do if you get that grant. We've all heard stories about people who win the lottery and then end up bankrupt in 3 months. If you're going for a grant, you want to know where that money is going to go before you apply, to make sure that you're getting the most use out of it when it comes in.
Whoops, Micah, we've got a question from Joanne who asks, can you recommend platforms for bookkeeping?
Yeah, there's a whole mess of different platforms. Most of them are online now. That's a good way to do it. You can share it with whoever's preparing your taxes. If you've got a couple of folks who do the books in your business, it's accessible from lots of places. they're all pretty good. It's hard to know which is going to be best. What I'd recommend doing is for your business, sort of think about what you're going to have to track, what the most complicated part of your business is going to be, and sort of look for the cheapest option that can really cover that to start. There are QuickBooks is the one that everybody thinks about. And QuickBooks is huge. It is, most companies that use QuickBooks only use like a quarter of it. Even the big ones. QuickBooks can do just about everything financially. So if you don't have to do everything, there are often cheaper or free versions of accounting softwares out there that work for you. And if you don't want to spend anything, I know, I'm trying to think of, I think Wave is a free one. They all have, most of the newer, freer, cheaper ones have a name that's just a noun. So that's a good way to kind of look for them. A lot of the ones that you hear about when you look at bookkeeping and accounting have been around for long enough that they've grown with their clients and are now just absolute overkill for a lot of small businesses. You wouldn't mow your yard with a John Deere, or with a huge John Deere that they use in Iowa. There's no reason to track your small business with the same accounting software that Microsoft uses.
Well, Micah, I have a follow-on. I just heard a story from somebody who had used an inexpensive or free program that, I don't know if they were purchased or if they changed direction, but they abandoned that platform and didn't provide the support for the transition to something else. So he essentially, had to scramble to download his data and try to, get it to work on another platform. Is there a risk to using a free or cheap version?
There's always a risk for it. And I mean, there's even a risk with QuickBooks. They've stopped supporting their desktop version. People, that used to be the only way to get QuickBooks was you'd buy, I think it was like 6 discs, and you'd keep it on your computer, and they would update it from time to time. And they're really pushing their online version. So there's always a risk, even with the really expensive ones. And a good practice to get into is pulling your data back out of whatever it is that you're putting into. Pulling the big 3 accounting reports, the profit and loss, statement of cash flow, and balance sheet. If you pull that out every month, even if the database that runs your accounting software burns to the ground, if you've got those saved on your computer, you can at least know that you're right up to the start of this month. And then it's easy to fix it if you've only got to fix something that's still in recent memory. As long as anything that you can't remember, that you don't want to have to remember, make a copy of it, keep it somewhere safe. And it's even nice too, especially with so many reports and so many platforms being online. Sometimes it's slow. Just like if you try to watch Netflix on a stormy Friday, it's slower than it is on a sunny afternoon. If it's the end of the month and everybody's pulling reports through their online accounting software, it slows down. And you don't want to be at a place where you're trying to quickly pull a report at the last minute when you're applying for a grant, or quickly trying to pull a report when you're talking to your co-owner, your employees, and not have it work. So having something that's fully controlled by you, that has your financial information in it, is always a really good step to have.
Yeah, it helps you be ready for the grant too, if you don't have to scramble for your financial records if they're in a file. You've been uploading those recently.
Mhm.
Joanne has a follow-on question. They've had trouble syncing Wave with their bank.
Mm.
Are there certain banks that have the capacity to work with accounting programs better than others?
There are. It's hard to predict which is going to work with which software, because there's such a patchwork of communication systems that they use. Some banks will, a lot of the bigger banks will use something called Plaid, which is just a way that banks can securely communicate with other softwares, but it's expensive to use Plaid. So a lot of some accounting softwares will choose to take something else, which will work better with other banks. So it's hard to know. If you're doing a massive amount of transactions, sometimes it might be worth going to a accounting platform that can sync with banks a little easier. If your bank statement, if your bank's only pushing a couple of transactions to your accounting software every month, it might be worth just sort of doing it manually and getting familiar with what it is that the accounting system and what it is that accounting as a concept does with the money hitting your bank. Yeah, and we can talk about that one-on-one later on too, if you'd like, and sort of troubleshoot it through there.
Yeah, Joanne, do feel free to reach out to Micah to ask questions further, although, we still have plenty of time today. Generally, are bigger banks more able to work with accounting platforms? I hate to ask that just because I like supporting smaller community banks, but is there a drawback to being with a credit union or a small community bank?
The bigger banks are always going to be a lot more seamlessly integrated into it, just because they've got the money to keep up on top of tech. They've got the money to buy the new program that's faster than the old one. They've got the money to really jump on stuff as it changes. The nice thing, though, a lot of accounting software will let you put stuff into it using a file format known as a CSV. It's a spreadsheet that has nothing in it besides numbers. And it's been around for a long time. So a lot of almost every bank is able to give you your information in a CSV. So even if you've got a local bank that you love and you don't want to get rid of, but they just don't work with your accounting software, often you can get your CSV from the bank every month, and then it's one more step to upload it into your accounting software. So there's always ways around it. And again, if it's something that's going to be, if you've got thousands of transactions a day in your bank, you're going to want to find the one that's going to work out easiest. And you'll probably want to go to a larger bank that can integrate better. If you're making 20 transactions a month and you can double check to make sure that the 20 you uploaded came through the right way, then it's worth staying with the bank you've got if you like them for all the other processes they do.
One of the other things we noticed, we had to verify that businesses were in business. So we had to, double check that they were registered with the state of Washington and that their business name was correct. And look at the NAICS code. Could you speak about some of those things and how people might have those on file or know where to find them quickly?
Yeah, good. So the state of Washington, all of their documents that you've submitted to them, you can see online, either through the Secretary of State or the Department of Revenue. And it's always a really good idea to spend the time and go in and make sure it's right. The last time I got my license, my driver's license redone, they spelled my name wrong. They switched the H and the A around, and I didn't exist effectively for a couple of weeks. And the same thing can happen to your business. It's easy for when you're filling out documents, if you've moved and forgot to update it, it doesn't match. You can't prove that you're that business anymore because something isn't right. And it's a really good idea to just sort of sit and think, especially since hopefully more grants will be coming out. It's worth thinking about every government agency that you've interacted with, and especially if you've submitted forms to them, and making sure that they're up to date and right. With the PPP, I had a client who moved twice, and when they tried to relocate their business license to their new location, because they were renting an apartment, the person who had lived there before them hadn't moved their business to where they lived, and it took 3 weeks to be able to update their business records because the state didn't want two businesses in the same apartment. So it took close to a month just to fix one little address line on one specific form, and it kept her from getting the money that she needed until things were dire. So getting on it quickly and getting on it before you really have to look is the best bet, because the state moves at its own pace, and you don't want to be rushing and hoping that somebody in Olympia can fill through the forms and send it back to the right person quick enough.
Well, Kathy has a comment here based on, the vetting that we did here with the ARPA Small Business Grant, that it's good to really fill out all the fields on the application form rather than leaving some blank, because each of those fields is scored. So even if you don't, you have to think about it deeply, really, if you're given an opportunity to say something more about your business, look at the grant criteria and consider your need and really speak to that, so you're not losing points by skipping a question.
Yeah, that's a huge thing to do, especially since a lot of the things that kind of help determine grants are legally an optional question to answer. There are grants that are aimed at Spanish-speaking business owners, but since if they are following certain rules, sometimes they cannot outright ask if you're Spanish speaking. You have to volunteer that yourself. With discrimination, disability, and all of that, there's so much laws around it built to protect people that there are questions organizations just can't ask. They can make it up, or they can't force you to answer. But if they're targeting a specific demographic, you absolutely need to be answering that, because if you don't, it might not be visible. They don't know you. When you're filling out a grant application, you are just, once again, a spreadsheet with a bunch of numbers and details in it. And it's hard to bring your personality to bear. So the more you can put in, and the more you can show about you and the business, the better.
Hi there. This is Dakota Sandoval. I have a question, if that's all right.
Yeah, of course.
Oh, of course, Dakota.
You mentioned the kind of quick turnaround for grants, and I was just wondering if you have any networks, online directories that would be readily checked to help make ourselves available of upcoming grants or active grants. I'm just curious where to look outside of getting kind of email, pushes and all that kind of stuff. Thanks so much.
Yeah, grants.gov is a pretty good one for like the federal level grants. if you're in a specific industry like farming or anything like something like that that has a government agency directed towards it, that specific agency will have a pretty good grant list. It's also worth just finding the nonprofit in the area that focuses on your business or businesses in general. The EDCs keep a pretty good eye on it. If you're in food, the WSU Extension sends out a newsletter once a month that covers pretty much everything that's coming up. And if for state and local ones, the Commerce Department, Washington's Commerce, has a pretty good website that will keep things up to date as well. But that really, it only focuses on the state ones. There's not really anywhere that brings everything all together under one umbrella. Because a lot of the times, especially with that short turnaround, if something will get announced, it'll end up on that umbrella and it's already a third of the way done. Perfect. Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, and JJ just said that the library in Port Angeles has a program for looking up grants. Is that something you can access just by logging into their website, or is it something that you've got to sort of go in and sit down at the desk for? Okay, perfect. Yeah, librarians, they are helpful as can be. That's another huge resource that we've all got available to us. Librarians love learning stuff and love sharing knowledge. So if you're looking through a grant and you're like, I don't even know what this thing is asking me for, a library is a wonderful place to go. Especially when you get into the more focused grants, they might be asking about concepts that you practice, but you've never heard talked about. A lot of the granting organizations they study the business itself without being very involved in the business. And you'll especially see it with USDA grants. They will ask about concepts that farmers have never heard of, despite practicing it every single day on the farm. But the USDA is full of people with agricultural science degrees and all of that, and it's different. So if there's ever terminology or concepts that they're referencing in a grant that you've never heard of, reach out to us, to any local nonprofit or group that helps your industry particularly, and the libraries. They'll point you in the right direction every single time.
Thank you.
Of course.
Well, Micah, when we were administering that ARPA grant, I spoke with Dr. Meredith at the Hadlock Library, and she had me, ensure that I would reach out to the community to let them know that they could go to the library for computer access. They could go to the library for answers to questions like, what the heck is a W-9 and how do I download a copy? A lot of the steps that were involved in the grant application process, the library was willing to help people source their answers to their questions.
Perfect. Yeah, and another big thing that libraries do is they let you scan stuff. So many grants are going to ask for documents that you only have on paper. And going in and scanning it, and then not just submitting it to the grant application, but sending a copy of it to yourself so you've got it there on your computer. Next time somebody asks for a scanned version of it is a huge thing that you can do with the library that helps you now and for any possible grant that comes up in the future. And not just grants. If in 5 years the IRS comes and asks for something, if you've got all these documents pulled already, because you submitted for a grant, that's even easier. Perfect. Yeah, and Melissa just said that there's a free app called Genius Scan that you can use on your phone to scan documents as well. Yeah, and other things you can do too. There's free websites that'll let you convert pictures into PDFs. It's never as clear as a scanner would be, but if that's the only thing you can do, if you got to get something submitted by midnight and it's 10 o'clock and you finally found it, often you can take a picture, email it to yourself, and find a way on the internet to turn it into whatever file format that they're asking for.
I'm curious how many people here might have a farming or value-added food business and be interested in USDA grants. Heidi. A lot of people don't have their cameras on. It's hard to tell. One. Kira. Oh, there's another one. Is that Joanne? Great.
Perfect.
So Micah, is there anything unique about USDA grants that folks might need to know about?
There are. So the USDA grants, well, I'd categorize them into two separate things. The USDA has to fund so much of farming, since it's a hard industry to be in, that there are a lot of grants that are open year-round. You apply for them, and if you meet the qualifications, there's money coming towards you. There are other grants that they release in a block in the spring. They're like, all right, we've got this much money to spend this year, just for this year, just for this project. Here's a new grant that's focused on this. Apply for it, and then we're closing and it's used up. So it really all just sort of breaks down to the funding they've got. There are some USDA projects that are ongoing and codified in law, so there's always going to be that grant available to apply for. Others, they've just got a tiny little bucket of cash and they're going to pour it out as quick as they can to get the results they're looking for, and will hopefully refill that bucket by the next year.
How about like people that run small businesses? What do you anticipate coming down the pike, and how can people feel ready?
Yeah, there's, based on, this has never been promised, but I feel like there are a lot more grants coming down the pipe that are focused on helping people that haven't gotten it before. And most people who haven't gotten grants haven't gotten it because they didn't have the formalization that existing businesses have. They don't have a legal department. They don't have an accounting department. They don't have an HR department that keeps track of all these things that the larger companies would. So getting all that stuff ready and prepared, and sort of thinking of what somebody outside of your business would need to see to trust that your business is real and doing things that you are doing. It's always good to get those prepared. The state is or was working on another grant called the Working Washington 5 that is a pandemic response grant. It isn't clear what they'll be focusing it on, but the last one was mostly focused on counties like ours, rural, really heavily impacted by the border closing and really depending on foot traffic. So we'll see what the state prioritizes for the next time.
Micah, Pete's got a question. How many successful grants have gone to industry and or manufacturers on the peninsula? Do we have an idea?
I don't. Cindy, you might have a better idea of it than I do. I know Colleen over here in Clallam County has some pretty decent compilations of it, but it's hard to find. A lot of granting agencies only tell the people who receive the grant what they're getting. Some of them will release that information a year later, just because that's finally the time that it's all been compiled. But it's hard to find that there. And especially with manufacturing, there's going to be a lot of grants specifically focused on manufacturing. And more so than just manufacturing as a whole, a lot of industry specific grants will be focused on targeted improvements. It'll either be like reducing carbon, something like that. As projects come up that the state or the government want to encourage, or as goals that they want to reach, they'll put out grants to help smaller businesses hit those numbers without the government really having to get involved.
Yeah, I don't really know where to get that information easily. We had to validate in the ARPA grant cycle if people had received grant funding prior. And we had to look at maybe 12 different grant sources, and we could find if an individual company had gotten a grant, but I don't think it was sorted at all by industry.
Mhm.
So that might take some research, Pete. I'm sorry, we don't have a quick answer for you. So Joanna asks, Working Washington 5, are you wanting to clarify the name of that grant to watch out for?
Oh no, Kira just asked the name of it and then I just was responding.
Oh, okay. Well, thanks.
Yeah.
That was helpful.
Yeah, and another good thing to keep an eye on too is what nonprofits have gotten big grants. Over here in Port Angeles, the food bank got some money from, I believe it was the USDA, and now they're expanding their program where they buy food directly from local farmers. And even if you aren't in a position to apply for grants that are coming up, keep an eye and pay attention to where that grant money flows in the community, because especially now with grants getting bigger than they've ever been in the past, you'll get nonprofits and organizations that'll almost double their budget overnight. And they've got to spend that on a lot of these grants. You've got to spend within a set amount of time. So it's always good to both see what grants would be available for you, and also pay attention to what grants that could impact you are coming into the area.
That's really great, Micah. I think it would be good for us to get on a series of email lists. Certainly, we try to push out any information we have about upcoming grants so people have time to apply. But it might be good to be on the Community Foundations list and CIE's list, and the Small Business Development Center always tries to help their clients be aware of upcoming opportunities. Yeah, the more aware we can be, the better. And it's certainly not organized in one place. So identifying the top players to be on their email list might be useful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and another whole concept, I've mostly talked about like business grants today. There are also some narrative grants. You'll see those happen with nonprofits pushing them out, where the business requirements are a little bit more relaxed, because they are trying to fix a problem using business, not trying to support businesses, if that makes sense. you'll often see it with those small dollar agriculture grants. It'll be a nonprofit that cares about soil health. So they're just like, hey, if you do regenerative agriculture, let us know what you're trying to do. We'll send you $1,000. They're not asking for nearly as much business detail as a lot of the business grants are going to. And same with artist grants. There are other grants that can support your small business that are a bit more narrative and focused on what you do within the business than how you record the business. But having those business documents ready is never going to harm you. Perfect. Any final questions for the day here?
Was this, I'd like to know, just for future recordings, was this helpful? Does this meeting needs for folks?
Yeah, this is great. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Gabrielle. Thumbs
Yeah,
up.
this is super helpful for us too. So thank you for doing it. We have some internet issues, so that's why we're not on video, but thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Perfect.
thank you.
Yeah, so I'll put my email and phone number in the chat here. And if you've got any questions or want help on anything specific that I covered here today, give me an email, give me a call, shoot me a text even, and I'm here to help.
Great. Thanks so much for joining us, Micah. We appreciate your good work and that CIE is offering free services for us. I really appreciate you.
Thanks for having me.
All right, take care. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
See you next month.